Be with you here today. Proverbs doesn't offer a ton to preach on, and today is a transition Sunday, and so I'm not really going to preach on the text too much, but more maybe on this poem and on the idea of transitions and interim. What does that mean? I mean, you didn't have necessarily a very long or traditional interim period, but you were in interim. You were sort of in limbo. Like, I was at the store last night. I went to REI, it was Labor Day sale, and there were all these sweaters on sale. And I was like, it's not cool enough to need a sweater, but I know I'm about to very much need way more sweaters than I have, right? Like, it's that this poem talks about that there's these moments where it's not quite there in the future that you know is going to happen, but it's not the old either. And sometimes those moments, those periods of our life, those seasons might be even harder because you don't really know where you're at, what to prepare for. And my favorite line of this poem is towards the end, and it says, "And it is difficult and slow to become new." It's so difficult and slow to become new that sometimes you don't even realize you're living in a new moment from before. Like, that might sound a little bit weird on the logic, but if you think about that, you're living a new moment right now that was so slow to happen, you probably didn't even realize it's happening. And so what's wonderful in the life of a church, of course, the loss of a pastor and then gaining a new pastor seems very fast. Like, those are like very clear, tangible moments. One person is no longer here, and then very suddenly they announce that you're a new pastor, and there's a new pastor here. That seems fast, but as I was here and just sort of walking the church before you all got here, I looked at there's a photo wall in the back, sort of in this back alcove, if you've never been back there, and there's two big framed pictures, and every pastor in the life of this church is up there, dating back to times when I'm like, very impressive they have a photo of this man. Very impressive that they have a staff photo of him. There's a long history of this church becoming what it is now and seeking to be together and live life together to live into a new future that you don't even yet know. And so that is so wonderful, and for those of us who hate transition, feels potentially very terrible. And all of those things are valid things to feel in moments of in-between and transition, and to not yet quite know what your future is, but to know that the past is no longer your reality. And so moments like this call for some of what Proverbs is talking about, which is to lean on the Lord. Every time you get a new pastor to church, it's a gamble, right? Because ultimately a pastor is just a person, not a man, but like a person. They're a person. Man in the general sense. But they're just a human, is what I mean. Every time that you hire someone new anywhere, a gamble, you have no clue if they will guide you well. You have no clue if their sermons are going to engage your community. You have no clue if they're going to be good at connecting with your neighbors. You don't know any of that. But what you're doing as a community is that you are leaning on God and trusting that God's presence is with your community and that the Spirit is living in each of you so that regardless of who your pastor is, you will be able to have relationship, you will be able to connect with your neighbors, you will be able to do things as a community regardless of whether this authority figure works out for you, right? And you saw that well this summer, that in a moment where some of you may have felt untethered in the loss of a pastor, which might have felt sudden for some of you, that still God's presence was alive and moving in the midst of your community. And I saw that as a visiting preacher each week. in the announcements, in conversations at tables, in each of you just checking in with one another. That is clear that the Spirit of the Lord continues to move in a community even when there's no head authority figure, even when there's no central person on the books. That the life of a community isn't whether or not your pastor is great and charismatic or good and connected. Obviously, we would all love a good, stable, and connected pastor that's a good fit for every community. But as a pastor, I know that no matter what community I'm with, I can't meet everything. And so these moments of interim that you all just experienced is a wonderful time to remember that becoming new is a slow process, or what is slow and difficult. And so as you continue to use your imagination for the type of community, the way of expressing God's love in the world that you all are and wish to be, that mission, that vision of God's is in and with you regardless of who is leading it. And so I pray that this new pastor is a wonderful fit for you. And it's very exciting to know that I'm sure you will all continue on, even if he doesn't fit every box that you wish he did. And that's, I think, where Proverbs does fit in with times of interim. That there might be a little anxiety, there might be high excitement, but God is with you in each and every one of those reactions to interim. And so just continue to remember that to become new is a slow and a difficult process. Because you are all becoming new every day. Your community is becoming a new community every day you continue to exist as a church. And you are not yet at the final destination. You don't quite know what this church could become or is becoming. Because we're not future tellers. I don't have that power. I'm sure none of you do. But that's the beauty of interim, is that it at least gives you that time to imagine. And so as you welcome this new pastor next week, even if you have that anxiety or there might still be grief or questions, that you enter into this time of imagination with him, and that you continue your solid, connected, Spirit-led relationships with one another, regardless of what authority is leading that. Because ultimately, the authority, although authority can be a loaded word, right? But ultimately, the single unifying triune power that is leading you will always be constant with you and in you. And so that's just my reflection and prayer for you as you're ending this interim time, going through transitions, and like me last night, it's still too hot for sweaters, but it's gonna be cold enough soon to need one. We're sort of in that moment as a community. And so I pray that God's Spirit continues to empower you, to connect you, and to comfort you in whatever way the end of this interim time is bubbling up inside of you. It's been wonderful, more than wonderful, to spend the summer with you. I've loved every minute of it. So I hope your new pastor loves to go on summer vacation so I can join you again next summer. You should really make sure he takes vacation. I would love to come back again in his moments of needing Sundays away. But I just invite you, as you go into this week before your new pastor comes, engage in a little imagination. Engage in that hope. Engage in thinking about, what does transition mean for you? How do you react to transition? Some of us might just need to process. But remember that line, that becoming new is a slow and a difficult process, but it's one that God is always with us in. invite you to reflect on that. And it's so wonderful to see you all as this summer is coming to a close. Perhaps you're here seeking refuge from the fair. And I'm so glad to have joined you this morning. Yes, just be well as you transition into this new moment. I'm so excited for you all. And that is where I'll end my reflection, just that excitement and hope for this community's future. Amen.